You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again today. Man, we have another episode lined up for y'all today. We're going to talk to an amazing person, Fatemah Mirza. She is a career coaching and resume expert. And if you know that we all have a little struggle with our resumes every now and then, well, she's going to be the one to come to rescue to help you just stick out from the rest of the crowd, because we know what it's like when you're trying to get a new job. Sometimes you just kind of blend in with everyone else. Well, this episode, we're going to learn everything about resumes and also a little bit about career development, maybe some interview coaching and some tips that you can take from that. But first and foremost, Fatemah, I want to welcome you to the show and say, how you doing?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's good to have you on. Now, before we dive into what you're doing today, give us a little backstory. What's some of the things that inspired you to say, you know what, I want to get into career coaching and specializing and helping people improve their resumes?
Absolutely. One of the things that inspired me to do this is a lot of people, I think they have a lot to say about their own journeys and about, why they're skilled and why they want to do what they'd like to do. But a lot of times I feel like professionals struggle to make that relevant to whoever is listening, whoever's on the other side of that computer or the table. So one of the things that I've run into a lot in my career is I see people's resumes that go into a lot of detail about everything that they've done. And this sometimes causes the HR people to pigeonhole them or dismiss them or say that they're overqualified or underqualified, when really all it takes to kind of fix that is to think about what they're hiring for and build your resume so that it's reverse engineered to speak to that, rather than taking your experience and putting it on paper, which I know a resume is supposed to be that. It's supposed to be like a summary of everything that you've done, but it's actually really a marketing document. And you don't want to talk about everything. You just want to keep it relevant to whatever they're hiring for. So once I made this connection, I started teaching it to people, and I realized that people really have a hard time understanding where that gap is happening. And I'm really happy to say that I found a fulfilling career showing people how to find that gap and how to speak to it.
I can imagine it must be a huge problem, and I wouldn't be surprised. We all been there. I applied for my first job. I got someone's help. I did not do it by myself. And I think that is going to be the norm. It's people who are taking their career move seriously. They're trying to make sure that they're nice and polished, and they're going to stick out. And that leads to this question. What are some of the common issues with people's resumes when they submit it out to a company?
Sure. So I think the biggest issue I kind of already mentioned, like people kind of talk about everything rather than focusing on the job description that they're supposed to be doing. The other thing is, it's very common to transition from one career to another these days. It's just normal, like it's expected really. But oftentimes the people that are on the other side of the table are more used to like a traditional world where that's not the norm, where you do one thing and you do it forever. So a lot of the things the main thing they're looking for when they're looking at your resume is, do you have a job title that is kind of in this career path? So if you're making a transition, let's say you're going from like teaching to marketing, they might see that and be like, okay, this is not someone I want to consider. I'm going to dismiss them. I'm going to pigeonhole them. This is a teacher. This is not a marketer. One of the things you can do to fix that is to really only talk about whatever you did that relates to marketing. So if you have, let's say, teaching experience and you're like, man, this does not relate at all to marketing, just put the job title. There's no need to talk about like how you improve test scores and all of that, unless you're going to be a marketer for teachers or something, So that's one mistake. The other thing that I think people do is, it's like when you read a book, if it's boring in the beginning, you're going to skim through the rest. But if that first line grabs you, like, have you ever seen like Tarzan, the Disney movie? You know, the opening sequence, I talk about this all the time. It's so interesting. This family goes from jumping off of this burning ship to building their own house to getting killed. Like, all this stuff is happening within the first 2 minutes. That's what you want to do with your resume. You don't want to put people to sleep. You want to say, I know exactly what conflicts you're trying to resolve in your business. I have done that before. I have a history of doing that. And even if the rest of your resume isn't super interesting or exciting, if that first part grabs them, they're going to read the rest of it with a lot more positivity and, you know, kind of favoring you more than they would if your beginning is not interesting.
And all that is good information. Now, when someone gets to I think the most scary part, I could be wrong, but you can correct me. What's up with cover letters? Because it's either one skipped or it's done completely wrong. Tell us, what is the science behind cover letters and why that is so important?
Sure. So historically speaking, a cover letter was a cover to your resume, right? Like, you would print it out, you'd staple it to your resume, you'd put it in an envelope and mail it out to a company whose listing you saw in a newspaper. So that's how people used to read cover letters. Like, they would open up the envelope, they would see, okay, these are the skills you have. This is interesting. I will read the resume now. Now the experience is different. The person who's hiring logs into their applicant tracking system or their hiring portal, and they have kind of like a condensed version of everybody. Like, you know how when you do a Google search, you don't see the entire page that you're landing on. You see little blurbs that describe, hey, if you click this page, here's what you're going to get. Similarly, these systems will give them these little blurbs. If that's interesting, they'll click on it and they'll read your resume. If that resume is interesting, they're going to read the cover letter. So the experience of the reader has totally changed, and cover letters basically need to reflect that. So back in the day, I mean, it was kind of encouraged to put in a lot of effort into cover letters, like, hey, customize it, you know, try to find that person's name, really address it to them like it's a proper letter, encouraging them to read your resume. That advice is not really relevant anymore. So now, if you want to write a good cover letter, first and foremost, you have to be careful with your time. Like, it's not going to be your best interest to spend, you know, an hour per application writing a cover letter from scratch. What you should instead do is have a template that's like pretty solid, like spend an hour on that. And then when you're applying, don't spend more than 2 minutes tweaking it. That's one big mistake I've seen a lot of younger people make, is they really put their heart and soul into their cover letter because they're looking at this outdated advice. And then they're like, they're not even reading the letter. Like, what am I supposed to do? Well, some people will read the cover letter if your resume is interesting. I actually have some statistics to show like how many people like reading resumes. It's 56%. So my advice is, and this changes from industry to industry, like the nonprofit industry and like the education field, they prioritize cover letters more because they really want to see who you are as a person and that you're passionate about the field and stuff like that. In IT, they don't care. They're like, whatever, just get the job done, right? Yeah. So that statistic varies from industry to industry. But the point is, there are some people reading it. And if you can just make a difference for those people, like, it can move your application forward, but don't overthink it. Don't overdo it. Just spend a little bit of time crafting the perfect letter that can quickly be customized.
Once again, let's on Focus Radio, talking to our guest today, Fatemah Mirza. She is a career coaching and a resume expert. She's also helping people with just interviewing skills as well, because it's one thing to have a great resume. But how important is the interview process and basically first impressions?
I would say it's really important. Whatever you present, you know, in the interview does make or break whether you get the offer. So it is very, very important that you present yourself as well as possible and try to get a little bit of practice before the interview.
And speaking of practicing, what were some of the common skills a person can get better at, whether they're prepping for a major interview or, you know, they just were doing research of the company or whatever, what are some of the best practices as far as like how you present yourself, some of the words you use, how you smile or don't smile, hands moving? What's some of the things you find are common good things to practice with?
Sure. So I think the best thing to practice, if you only, let's say, have like 10 minutes to prepare for an interview and you absolutely have to prioritize your time, the key thing that you want to practice is look at the job description they're hiring for and really make sure that your answers use the language presented in that job description. Like I had this client who I was coaching for interviews, and he was trying to transition into curriculum development from the teaching space. So he was a teacher and he was doing some curriculum development, but he wanted to do that full time. Now, the skills are very similar, but some of the language used is a little bit different. So what would happen is he would go for interviews and then people would just be like, oh, whatever, you're just a teacher. Like you haven't really done this properly. However, if you really use the language they're using in that space, you give them this vibe like, oh yeah, I'm in the know. Like I know how to speak your language. I know your world. So that's minimum what I would do. If you have a little bit more time, definitely want to research the interviewer, look them up on LinkedIn and perhaps on any other social media platform that you can find them on. See, what they like, what their journey has been, because this has a great potential for you to connect with them in a deeper level. Because at the end of the day, like we're not going to try to work with people we don't like. So establishing that likability is really important. Like I had this interview recently with a gentleman who, his career path was really interesting to me and it was like very aligned to mine. So I asked him a couple questions about that when it was my turn to ask questions, and I could tell he really liked that. So that's an additional level of prep that I would do. And then depending on the industry that you're in, more prep can involve studying their website, studying their products, looking at their marketing collateral, looking them up on different social media platforms, the company, and all of that good stuff.
And going back to the resumes that, basically lands you the interview, are there certain designs that actually make your resume seem more appealing, or is it more so important about the content and how the content is listed?
Absolutely. So design is important in that you want things to be legible, but that's it. Like beyond that, you don't want to mess too much with the design because there's a high chance that if the systems they're using to read your resume are like older or outdated, which does happen because companies aren't going to keep investing in like better and better hiring software. What's going to happen is that system is going to look at your fancy and colorful resume and it's going to be like, I don't know what this is. And it's going to just spaz out. So whenever I write a resume, it's always like black and white. There's some, the headings are a little bit bigger. There's a little bit of bolding, but that's it. Beyond that, I don't do anything because it's just so important that these tools are able to read and parse through your resume. Secondly, the fancier your resume is, the more likely it is that the other person, the person at the other end of the computer is like older, like they don't really know what they're looking at. Maybe the font isn't something they can read because their eyesight isn't good. Like you'd be surprised at, some of the people that are responsible for hiring decisions and what their preferences are. So rather than trying to figure out what their preferences could be, it's better to just go as neutral as possible, completely black and white, and use your words to make them fall in love with you because pink and blue and purple isn't going to do that.
That's pretty good right there. That's almost kind of funny right there. But yeah, talking to Fatemah Mirza here on Refocus Radio, and when people are really into the job, now that they got it, right? Mm-hmm. Biggest test is everything on your resume, legit? Because now the test is how you going to perform. Because this whole point of having a resume is being able to like work well where you're at, because that's what builds, for the next opportunity. What are some of the things people can practice when they are in the job now that they have it? Because there's got to be some fundamental things that people can practice that will carry them on. Because I feel like the more you are working and performing in a higher level, your next resume is going to be a lot more easier.
Absolutely. So there's two things you can do. The first thing is to understand that this job that you've just taken is a stepping stone to the next one. So if that means, if to you, that means, a different job title, like let's say you just got a job as a sales associate and you want a sales manager job as the next one. So for you, you can map out like, okay, I'm going to try to get promoted here, or I'm going to try to build up that, management skill by mentoring people and by doing some sales road mapping and forecasting. And so I can add these to my resume and get that job title elsewhere. Maybe that's your next priority, or your next priority is, I like this job. I like the job description a lot. I like what I'm doing, but I'm not getting paid enough. I want to find the same job at a different company where I'm being valued more. So having this roadmap in mind is important because then it can help you understand what to prioritize. The second thing is you want to actually excel at the job itself so that you are able to walk away with a really strong resume with lots of great accomplishments in there, showing that you achieved everything that you were hired to achieve. So this actually begins when you're interviewing. When they ask you, hey, do you have any questions for us? One of the questions you have to ask, if they haven't made it obvious already, is, hey, what's it going to take for you to say within the next 6 months that I've been a successful hire? Or what are your most pressing projects that you need to have concluded within the next quarter or 2 quarters or whatever? So what is their headache basically? What are they trying to solve? Based on that, you can figure out what objectives you need to achieve. And if there are any skills you need to learn to hit those objectives, then you can hop on to Udemy or LinkedIn Learning or whatever and practice those skills.
You also have a resource for our listeners. They can go to your website, CareerTuners.com/free-resources. And that page, explain a little bit what's some of the tools that people can tap into and just use for furthering their goals.
Absolutely. So if you guys head on to CareerTuners, that's CareerTuners.com/podcasts. Actually, I have a few more free resources there for people who listen to any of the podcasts that I'm going on. Some of the great free resources that me and my team have put together entail my resume cheat sheet. It's just a 2-page cheat sheet that literally breaks down everything you need to have a powerful resume. And I put this together after surveying more than 3,000 recruiters on hiring best practices. Similarly, I have a LinkedIn cheat sheet that I created using the exact same surveying process. That is also something you can grab there, as well as a cover letter template and my interview cheat sheet, which has a bunch of templated answers for the toughest interview questions, answers that, people get wrong all the time. Like some of the simplest questions, like tell me about yourself. People mess it up so badly all the time. I break down exactly what they're looking for, how to answer, how to keep your answers short and to the point. You can grab that, as well as the only networking template you will ever need. All of that is available at CareerTuners.com/podcasts.
And I have to go back to the interview portion, because if you had it on top of your head, what's probably the number one worst thing a person can say during an interview?
I think the worst thing you can say during an interview is basically not speaking their language, right? Or, the worst thing is, cursing, foul language, all of that. But like in the normal thing that I've seen a lot of people doing is, like that guy who kept talking in like teaching language when he should be talking about, curriculum development language. That's one of the big things he was doing. Another big mistake I see a lot of people making, which is frankly really surprising to me, is saying anything negative about their previous employer or colleagues. That is a big no-no, because like I said earlier, when someone is interviewing you, they are trying to see if you're a likable person. Am I going to want to sit next to this person for the next 12 months?
Right.
And if you go into the interview and you're like, hey, I wasn't successful at this last job because, my colleagues had this project and I didn't really agree with the premise. And no one cares. And that's reflecting poorly on you. They're now thinking, oh, this person's difficult to work with. They are going to relate more with the person you're talking trash about. So it's just do not do that at any cost. So there are a few ways to actually, channel that frustration in a way that's productive, rather than using language like, oh, we didn't really see eye to eye, which is very, very kind of hostile and not very nice. You can say things like, so, they had this vision for this project and their number one priority was such and such. And we had to adjust this priority because of such and such reason. And we were able to conclude the project with this positive outcome. Using language that really shows that you can empathize with people with different viewpoints, with different objectives and stuff. That's so, so important, because that shows that, look, yeah, there are going to be times where your priorities are going to be different from your colleagues and you're going to have these kind of conflicts. How do you come out of that? Is it by holding grudges and being like, oh, now this project isn't in line with what I wanted to do? Or is it, okay, I see your point. Let's see how we can hit both of our objectives, Yeah. So that's one really big thing that people do in interviews. That's really surprising to me. But I guess this happens because, you're so emotionally attached to your work and you're looking at everything from your perspective. It does really help a lot to kind of run your answers by someone who can tell you very honestly, hey, you sound like you're very hard to work with. You sound unlikable. Because when someone tells you that, it can allow you to reflect and be like, yeah, I do come across like that, even though I know I'm not. But I need to just adjust my language so that first impression is really strong.
It's because you need career tuners. That's the problem. That's the problem. We need maintenance done. Once again, talking to our guest, Fatemah Mirza. You can go to her website, CareerTuners.com, tuners.com. I keep saying Turners. I'm sorry. My apologies. When people are really into getting their career intact, because everyone has goals, but you need a roadmap to get there. You have tons and tons and tons of testimonies. Testimonials on your website, people using your service. What's one that kind of sticks out where they got a big job and maybe they didn't think they could get it in the first place until they got your help, and then boom, they were able to achieve that?
I mean, there's quite a few like that. There's one gentleman who left a review on one of my colleagues' profile that said that he doubled his salary, and then after a couple years at working at that job where he was making double his pay, he was like, hey, can you update my resume again? I've done a bunch of stuff. And then he went on to secure a 15% additional increase over that doubling. So that one was really good. I think it just goes to show, especially pre-COVID, a lot of people were just not really empowered to negotiate their salaries and, really ask for what they're worth and all of that. But I think COVID, there was a lot of awareness that, hey, what are you making and what are you making? And let's see if we can figure out how we can all make more money together. So I think the world seems to be in a slightly better place post-COVID just for that reason. And I hope that continues. I hope people are continued to ask for more, understand, how to do salary research and go after those companies that do value their employees.
Once again, Fatemah, go to her website, CareerTuners.com. And when we wrap this up, last question, call to action that you want our listeners to take. We did kind of touch on some of the resources you have on your website, but is there any other call to actions that you like for us to explore? If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at CareerTuners. It's Career Tips by CT, at Career Tips by CT. And on LinkedIn, you can just search for CareerTuners and follow me. Once again, talking to our guest here on Refocus Radio, Fatemah Mirza. You go to her website. It's an easy website. I mean, it's what we all need. We need a tune-up. Go to CareerTuners.com. If you're tired of your resume just not doing its job, well, it's time to get it maintenance checked out and go to that next level. Once again, I want to say thank you to you, Fatemah, taking time in your schedule to talk to Refocus Radio today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.